Have you ever stood next to someone with a fancy DSLR camera and thought, wait, my phone has way more megapixels than that thing? Like your Samsung or iPhone is rocking 108 megapixels and this photographer's professional camera only has 12. So why do their photos look like they belong in National Geographic while yours look like they were shot through a dirty window? Here's what nobody tells you about megapixels. That big number on the box? It's basically a marketing trick. And I'm not being dramatic here. The camera companies know exactly what they're doing. They plaster 108 MP across their ads because bigger numbers sell phones. But here's the thing that might shock you. More megapixels can actually make your photos worse. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to understand why sensor size matters way more than megapixel count. And once you see this, you'll never fall for the megapixel hype again. You'll know exactly what to look for when buying a camera or phone, and you'll finally understand why professional photographers spend thousands of dollars on cameras with low megapixel counts. So let's destroy this myth once and for all. Picture this scenario. You're at the Grand Canyon, sunset's happening, those oranges and purples are absolutely insane. You pull out your phone, the one with 108 megapixels that costs you $1,200, you take the shot, it looks amazing on your screen, but when you get home and look at it on your laptop, it's grainy, the colors are washed out, the shadows look like someone spilled black paint on them. Meanwhile, your friend who brought an old Canon with 12 megapixels, their photos are stunning, sharp, rich colors. You can see details in the shadows and highlights. It doesn't make sense, right? Here's what's really happening. Everyone tells you that megapixels equal quality. More pixels mean more detail. Better photos, sharper images. That's what Best Buy tells you. That's what the commercials say. That's what the tech reviewers seem to imply when they compare specs. But that's not what actually happens. What really happens is that cramming 108 million pixels onto a sensor the size of your pinky nail creates massive problems. Think about it this way. You're trying to fit 108 million tiny buckets into a space smaller than a Tic Tac. Those buckets are going to be microscopic. And this matters because those tiny pixels can't capture enough light. It's not just about having detail in your photos, it's about having photos that actually look good. When you take a picture in anything other than perfect bright sunlight, those tiny pixels struggle. They can't gather enough light. So your phone's processor has to guess what should be there. It cranks up the brightness artificially, and that's when you get noise, those ugly colored specks that make your night photos look like static. Here's what most people don't realize about how cameras actually work. When you take a photo, you're not just capturing an image, you're capturing light. That's it. That's all photography is. Light hits a sensor, and that sensor records how much light hit each pixel. Now, there's this pattern I call the bucket problem. Imagine you're trying to collect rainwater. You've got two options. You can set out 108 tiny shot glasses, or you can set out 12 big buckets. Same amount of space on the ground, but which one's going to collect more water during a light drizzle? The big buckets, right? Because each bucket has a bigger opening, more surface area to catch drops. The shot glasses, most of the rain's going to miss them entirely. And that's exactly what's happening inside your phone camera versus a DSLR. Each pixel is like a bucket for light. A bigger pixel can catch more light. It's got more surface area. When a photon of light comes flying in, a bigger pixel is way more likely to catch it. But when you cram 108 million pixels onto a tiny phone sensor, each pixel becomes microscopic. They're like those shot glasses trying to catch rain. This matters because photography is all about light, especially in challenging conditions. When you're shooting at your nephew's birthday party inside a dimly lit house, or trying to capture that amazing sunset, or taking photos at a concert, you need pixels that can actually gather enough light to create a clean image. Your phone's processor tries to compensate. It uses something called computational photography. It takes multiple photos and combines them. It applies artificial intelligence to reduce noise. It sharpens edges and boosts colors. And sometimes it works pretty well. In bright daylight, your phone can take amazing photos. But here's where it gets interesting. All that computational stuff, it's basically your phone trying to fix a hardware problem with software. It's like trying to turn a Honda Civic into a pickup truck by strapping a trailer to it. Sure, you can move some stuff, but it's never going to be the same as just having a truck to begin with. Let me show you what happens in low light. When there's not much light available, those tiny pixels in your phone are starving. They're not collecting enough photons. So what does your phone do? It cranks up something called ISO, basically the sensitivity of the sensor. It's like turning up the volume on a quiet recording. But here's the problem. When you boost ISO, you're amplifying everything, including the random electrical noise in the sensor. It's like when you turn up the volume on your car radio when the signal's weak, you don't just get louder music, you get louder static too. And this is why your phone's night photos look terrible compared to a real camera. Those big pixels in a DSLR sensor, they're collecting way more light. They don't need to crank the ISO as high, so you get clean images with actual detail in the shadows. Now, this next pattern is particularly sneaky because phone companies know exactly how to hide it. They show you photos taken in perfect conditions, bright sunny days, well-lit scenes. And yeah, in those situations, your 108 megapixel phone can take great photos, sometimes even better than a cheap DSLR. But what about the other 90% of situations? What about indoors? What about sunset? What about anywhere that's not a beach at noon? That's where the tiny pixels fall apart. There's another thing happening here that nobody talks about. It's what I call the detail paradox. You'd think more megapixels means more detail, right? More pixels to capture more information. But here's the wild part. Those tiny pixels are so small that they actually capture less real detail. Why? Because of something called diffraction. Without getting too technical, light doesn't travel in perfectly straight lines. When light passes through the tiny opening of your camera lens, it bends slightly. And when pixels are really small, that bending becomes a problem. The light meant for one pixel bleeds into neighboring pixels. Everything gets softer, less sharp. It's like trying to draw a detailed picture with a really thick marker versus a fine pen. Sure, the thick marker covers more area, but can you actually draw finer details? Nope. The line's too fat. Same thing happens with tiny pixels and diffraction. Professional photographers know this. That's why you see wedding photographers using cameras with 24 or 36 megapixels instead of 100. They want pixels big enough to actually capture clean, sharp detail. Not marketing numbers that sound impressive but create mushy images. Here's what makes this even more surprising. Phone cameras have gotten incredibly good at faking detail. They use something called edge enhancement. The software detects where edges should be and artificially sharpens them. It adds contrast, it makes things look crisp on your phone screen, but zoom in on your laptop, look at the actual data, and you'll see it's not real detail. It's algorithmic sharpening. It's your phone painting over the limitations of those tiny pixels with software tricks. Compare that to a photo from a DSLR with bigger pixels. The detail is actually there in the data. You can crop it, you can enlarge it. The information is real, not invented by an algorithm. This connects to something even deeper about how we've been trained to think about camera specs. We've been taught that bigger numbers mean better. More megapixels, better camera. Higher refresh rate, better screen. More RAM, better phone. And in some cases, that's true. But with camera sensors, there's a physical limit. You can't cheat physics. You can't make a pixel the size of a grain of sand collect as much light as a pixel the size of a pea. It's impossible. The surface area just isn't there. And here's the uncomfortable truth that phone companies definitely don't want you thinking about. They're in an arms race of meaningless specs. Samsung releases 108 megapixels, so the next company goes to 200 megapixels. It's coming. Mark my words. We're going to see phones advertising 500 megapixels within a few years. But it's all theater. It's not making photos better. In many cases, it's making them worse. Because those pixels keep getting smaller and smaller, struggling more and more in real-world conditions. What's actually happening here isn't about making better cameras. It's about making better marketing. 108 MP camera system sounds way cooler than large sensor with optimal pixel size. Nobody's going to stop scrolling past the second one. But everybody understands bigger number equals better, even though in this case it's completely backwards. Let me tell you about two people who learned this lesson. There's Jessica. Jessica upgrades her phone every year. She always gets the one with the most megapixels because that's obviously the best camera, right? She's got the latest flagship with 108 megapixels. Jessica takes photos at her sister's wedding. Indoor venue, mixed lighting, some candles, some overhead lights. She's so excited because her phone has more megapixels than the professional photographer's backup camera. More pixels means better photos, that's what the commercial said. But here's what Jessica doesn't realize. Every photo she takes indoors looks noisy. The colors are off. When she tries to take a photo of the cake in the dim lighting, it looks grainy and weird. Her phone keeps switching to night mode, which takes 3 seconds per photo, way too slow to catch candid moments. She blames herself. Maybe she's not holding the phone steady enough. Maybe she needs to learn more about photography, but it's not her fault. Those tiny pixels on that tiny sensor just can't gather enough light to create clean images in challenging situations. Now compare that to Marcus. Marcus shoots photos as a side gig. Events, portraits, some product photography. He uses a camera that's 8 years old. It only has 20 megapixels. His friends tell him he should upgrade newer phones, have way more megapixels than his old camera. But Marcus understands something that most people don't. His camera has a sensor that's about 30 times larger than a phone sensor. Those 20 million pixels are spread across way more surface area. Each pixel is huge compared to a phone pixel, like dramatically bigger. So when Marcus shoots that same wedding in the same lighting, his photos are clean, the colors are accurate, he can shoot at ISO 1600 and still get usable images. No noise, no grain, no weird artifacts from aggressive noise reduction software. And here's what happened. Jessica's photos look okay on her phone screen, but when her sister tries to print them for the wedding album, they fall apart. The noise becomes visible. The lack of real detail becomes obvious. Meanwhile, Marcus's photos from his old camera with only 20 megapixels, they look stunning at any size. Notice the difference? It's not about megapixels at all. It's about sensor size and pixel size. Marcus has fewer but better pixels. Jessica has way more but worse pixels. And in photography, quality beats quantity every single time. Here's what most people don't realize when they're comparing specs. Sensor size isn't usually advertised. Phone companies don't plaster 1/1 3-inch sensor on their billboards because most people don't know what that means. But they absolutely advertise 108 megapixels in giant letters. Meanwhile, DSLR and mirrorless cameras, they've got sensors that are genuinely massive in comparison. A full-frame sensor in a professional camera is about 40 times larger than a typical phone sensor. Even a cheaper crop sensor camera has a sensor that's around 15 times bigger than your phone. That extra space isn't wasted. It allows for bigger pixels that can capture more light. It allows for better color accuracy. It allows for shallower depth of field, that blurry background effect that makes portraits look professional. And it allows for way better performance in low light. It's not actually about megapixels at all. It's about the physics of light collection. The people who succeed at photography don't obsess over megapixel counts. They understand that sensor size, lens quality, and pixel size matter way more than the number on the spec sheet. These patterns aren't personal failures. You're not dumb for thinking more megapixels means better photos. That's exactly what the marketing wants you to think. It's a predictable trap that catches everyone who doesn't understand the underlying physics. But now that you see how light collection actually works, you can't unsee it. Every time you see a phone advertised with some crazy megapixel count, you'll know it's mostly marketing. You'll ask the question that actually matters. How big is the sensor? How big are the individual pixels? Because those factors determine whether your photos will actually look good or just sound good on paper. So here's what we've uncovered. Megapixels are just one tiny part of what makes a good camera. And past a certain point, somewhere around 12 to 24 megapixels, for most people, adding more doesn't help. It can actually hurt if it means shrinking pixel size. Sensor size matters way more. Bigger sensors mean bigger pixels. Bigger pixels mean better light collection. Better light collection means cleaner images with more accurate colors and better performance in challenging lighting. It's that straightforward. Phone cameras have gotten incredibly sophisticated with computational photography. They can do amazing things in good light. But they're fighting against physics. You can't make a sensor the size of a fingernail perform like one the size of a credit card, no matter how smart your software is. Think about everything we just explored. The bucket problem shows why bigger pixels collect more light. The detail paradox reveals that tiny pixels actually capture less real detail due to diffraction. And the uncomfortable truth is that megapixel counts are mostly a marketing arms race that doesn't improve real-world photo quality. The question isn't whether you should buy a phone with a high megapixel count or a dedicated camera. That depends on your needs. If you're mostly taking photos in good light and sharing them on Instagram, your phone is probably fine. The convenience factor alone makes it the right choice for most people most of the time. But if you're wondering why a professional camera takes better photos despite lower megapixels, now you know. It's not magic. It's not special settings or professional skill, though those help. It's fundamental physics. Bigger sensors with bigger pixels simply gather more light and create better images. And here's the part that changes everything. Next time you're shopping for a phone or camera, you won't be fooled by megapixel marketing. You'll look for sensor size information. You'll understand that a 48 megapixel phone with a slightly bigger sensor is probably better than a 108 megapixel phone with a tiny sensor. You'll know that those professional mode settings in your phone camera are trying to compensate for hardware limitations. And you'll understand why professional photographers aren't rushing to switch from their 24 megapixel cameras to phones with 5 times as many pixels. The megapixel myth works because bigger numbers feel better. It's the same reason people think a $200 HDMI cable is better than a $10 one. It costs more, so it must be better, right? But just like those overpriced cables, megapixel counts beyond a certain point are selling you something that doesn't actually improve your experience. So next time you're looking at camera specs, remember those buckets collecting rain. Would you rather have 108 tiny shot glasses or 12 big buckets? Because that's really what you're choosing between. The answer depends on whether you want impressive sounding numbers or actually better photos. And once you see this, you can't unknow it. Every camera advertisement will look different. You'll see through the marketing. You'll understand the physics. And you'll make better decisions based on what actually matters. Not the biggest number, but the right balance of sensor size, pixel size, and image quality for how you actually use your camera